How is everybody doing? Strength Chat episode 120, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by a World's Strongest Man competitor. He's the 2020 Britain's Strongest Man. He's also an S&C coach over at Harlequins Rugby. Today I'm joined by the one and only Adam Bishop. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, much better after that fantastic introduction. So yeah, great. It's good to be here.
I like to build it up. It gets people revved up for the podcast.
Yeah.
What have you been up to? What's been going on in your world at the minute?
Well, obviously, yeah, we've got the whole lockdown situation, which is kind of less than ideal. We haven't got any competitions on at the moment. But for me, it's business as usual. Like my training is still going ahead. Just changed the focus of it. But yeah, no work. Obviously, unfortunately, the rugby season's been put on hold, which means I'm just pretty much living and breathing strongman at the moment. So yeah, full-time athlete, and we'll see how we can progress from there.
That's not bad then. Are you treating this as a little bit of an off season then, or how have you switched your focus a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So we haven't got any comps now. Well, as it stands, we've still got the Royal Albert Hall comp, which is the Strongman Classic. That's still going ahead as it stands, which is I believe it's June the 6th.
Yeah.
But we're kind of working day by day with that. So yeah, I'm treating it as a little bit of a kind of off season. Yeah. Especially with Worlds now moved back until November.
Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of time. So it's some time to put some body weight on and get a little bit stronger.
Nice. Do you reckon you'll keep training as normally up until June then, or do you reckon you'll if that June competition goes ahead?
If it goes ahead, so I'm still training as if I've got it. I believe we've got a silver dollar deadlift for max there. Yeah. So I'm still kind of pushing that. I'm still kind of doing my little event session on the Friday. It's just the rest of my training is now kind of focused on more repetitions. So, I believe the events for the classic are a dumbbell for reps, silver dollar deadlift, Hercules hold and stone. So not many events. So it's a little bit easier to train for. Yeah. But ultimately it's going to be a good show if we can do it. So it's just kind of staying sharp for that. And obviously I'm pushing the weight on the silver dollar. But the rest of my deadlifting has taken a little bit of a kind of a step back, let's say, from the volume I usually do on it.
Yeah, I've actually been following because I saw you put up. You've been training for the silver dollar deadlift. How have you managed to sort of replicate that? What equipment have you got from that? Because obviously it's a little bit different to a standard deadlift with what you've been using.
Yeah, so if anyone doesn't really know the history of the silver dollar, it's a circus lift. We've had it at World's Strongest Man. It was back in the 80s. I think Kaz was one of the first persons people to break the record on it. And it used to be a barbell set 18 inches off the floor, so that's effectively twice the height of a usual bar for the powerlifting purists. And it was two big boxes that they used to fill with silver dollars. That's how they used to make the weight. And in various different years, it's been done with different implements in the boxes. We're moving back to putting kind of plates in the boxes now. But ultimately, it's a barbell, two large boxes, suspended at 18 inches off the floor. So, very specialist bit of kit you kind of need, really. I'm very fortunate the guys at Rebel Strength made me some quite compact attachments to go on the bar that simulate it really, really well. So I kind of pull them out and then just get the bar set to 18 inch and load them up with plates.
Yeah. Has it been quite nice to do that variation? Because obviously deadlift is obviously one of your strongest lifts. Has it been quite nice to play around with a variation like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been quite strong from that height. I remember back competing at UK's Strongest Man, I think in the heats in 2014, I think I pulled 400 off an 18-inch block for 9 reps. So that was even back then, back in 2014. So it's always been a really good height for me. But it's nice to do a different variation. Obviously, we've done a lot of axle deadlifting at Giants Live shows for a while, and apart from that, it's obviously been the max on a standard deadlift bar. So it's quite nice to do a different deadlift variation for a bit.
Nice. So for everyone listening who might not know your background of how you got involved in strongman, and obviously you work with Harlequins and how you've progressed through your career, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, I used to be a rugby player. I was in the academy at Saracens. Kind of worked up, did a year full time in their senior academy. So train with the big boys. And yeah, it was there I kind of realised that I was a really good athlete, but maybe just didn't have that set position on the field. I really excelled in like sevens, but I didn't really have that out and out position. So, I started off in the back row, and then I actually moved up to the wing halfway through the year. So I was playing on the wing at like 6'3", 102 kilos, 100 kilos. And, once I had a year there, and I got offered a similar contract to the kind of deal I was on, very much a bottom baseline contract. And I had a decision to make, do I go take up my place at university that I deferred for a year already, up at Loughborough, or do I kind of stay and give the rugby a go? And I decided that, if I'm good enough to play rugby, I'll be able to come back to it at some point. So I went up to Loughborough to study sports science up there, and it's a really good decision, obviously. While I was playing up there, I used to train in the gym, and one of the guys said I should go and give this strongman a go. And it was literally in a dusty yard in the middle of Leicestershire. All the kit was homemade. A guy called Jason Talbot was the guy who kind of introduced me to it and taught me the techniques and stuff. I'm forever grateful for him. But these guys, I was like the little guy, and I was just training with these monsters. There was like 170 log presses going up back then. Like 105 kilo single arm dumbbell presses. So there's some big weights being lifted, and it was like me trying to catch up. So I think I started off in the 105 class in 2010, and then into 2011, and won the UK under 105s in 2011, and that's when I moved up to the Opens, and kind of been progressing slowly ever since. And I think that's been the key to my success, has just been that kind of slow progression. So I started off in 2012. I won the UK's strongest junior, and then 2013 like South England strongest man, and then second at UK's behind Eddie in 2014. Got my chance to go and compete at Giants Live. Came fourth at my first Giants Live out in Sweden in an international field. That was my first time competing against like the guys like Brian Shaw and Johannes Ahu, and it was absolutely incredible. To be out on that stage at the end of 2014, and to qualify for World's Strongest Man the first year I'd been kind of at a Giants Live was like a dream come true. So going out to World's Strongest Man in 2015, I'm on the plane, and I look across, and in the other side of the aisle is Big Z. So I'm sitting on the same flight going out to Putrajaya, Kuala Lumpur as Big Z, and this is when Big Z was Big Z. So he was 180 kilos. It wasn't until we actually got off the plane that I realised that his wife was next to him. Like he was so big that he blocked out everything, and then we didn't even see his wife. But it was just it was I think when I first started training in that dusty yard in Leicestershire, I said that I wanted to compete at World's Strongest Man in 5 years, and I did that, and then it was right. So we've made World's Strongest Man. Now the hard work starts. It's not just kind of completing it to be competing for it, and that's another 5 years rolled before I actually won my first open competition, which was Britain's.
It must be quite cool, because I know from a fan's point of view, having been to Britain's Strongest Man, I mean, I'd really like to go and watch, especially in the locations that World's Strongest Man's at. I'd love to go out to one of those, but it must be pretty cool to be able to, like you said about that dusty yard, if you like, to then go to these events and the arenas that you're competing in with the crowds, because strongman has become so much popular. Do you get to, because having been to the events, you do interact with the crowd a little bit. Do you find it and enjoying it and sort of embrace it a little bit with the crowd?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we started out, we were in literally, I think my first competition was in the pub car park. And it was it's definitely changed now. Just the development that obviously the Giants Live guys have done in terms of these big arena shows is absolutely epic. And now we're getting between 8,000 and 12,000 people turning up to watch a live show, which is fantastic. And anyone who's listened to this who hasn't been to one of those shows, I mean, you're spoilt for choice now. I definitely recommend you go and watch them, because that way you don't have to wait till Christmas to see the results. You can kind of watch us live, and we love having the crowds there, because you can't not hear like 12,000 people like screaming for you when you've got a max deadlift or something like that. So it's the more people come, the more we enjoy the show, and the bigger show we put on for everyone. So yeah, it's pretty epic. Pretty epic. We've got the big shows now.
I do feel quite lucky, really, because with myself being based in Leeds, obviously Europe's strongest man at the arena. I actually remember going to Headingley Stadium when it was outside, but then to go see it in the arena is a completely different animal, really. When everyone's looking at the stage, and then British strongest man being in Sheffield, quite lucky that it's quite close, really. Obviously, you mentioned starting in the 105 class and then going up into the open, and seeing like what you mentioned there, when people are watching it on Christmas and seeing the size of these guys. How did you go about sort of increasing your weight, and did you always have the goal of getting a little bit heavier? And do you feel like that benefited your training, or do you think some areas it dropped down a little bit?
Yeah, I think, if you look at myself and Hicksy, we actually took two very different approaches. So we both moved into the opens at the same time. And Hicksy was a little bit further on than me in terms of static strength. So, but he just put on a shitload of weight, like real quick, and got up to that open weight, and that's how he decided to do it. For me, I felt like I needed to do it more gradually. I tried to put on as much kind of muscle mass as possible, and limited the amount of fat I was putting on, because I just thought, I'm in it for the long haul. What's the rush, So in terms of structuring my training, obviously I put in a lot more volume, more kind of classical bodybuilding movements went into my program, and then it was just all food, just ups my food, and something that I've always struggled with is kind of putting on weight. So it's been a tough one for me, and I've kind of played around with different diets, worked with different people, until I kind of started to really find some success with the diet I'm on now. Yeah. But it was definitely a long process, and that was a conscious effort by me not to try and hammer the weight on too quickly, because I just wanted I've seen a lot of people, burst onto the scene and then fall away just because they've tried to get too strong or too heavy too quickly, and it's caused them either some kind of joint and tendon issues or some health issues as well. So really important for me to take things a little bit more gradually.
Yeah. Do you think, because obviously being a strength conditioning coach, do you reckon that helped with your training and be able to manage yourself a little bit more, because you sort of you'll look at competitions that other people will get in, and I compete in powerlifting myself, so sometimes there's that feeling of I'm already heavy, so I'm just going to eat what I want and then lift heavy weights. But with your obviously background in S&C, do you think that sort of helped you a little bit to have that consistent progress?
Yeah, I guess actually it was both a help and a hindrance when I first started. So obviously it's a help because I got my techniques nailed down early on. I'm big on kind of making sure that my lifts are efficient, whether that's kind of deadlifting, moving, even like loading races, lifting stones. I made sure I drilled out the techniques early on. And then obviously I know, what I need to be doing every kind of training cycle, and my planning is kind of very extensive in terms of like planning out a full year's training program. Like I plan for World's Strongest Man the day after World's Strongest Man. So I sit down in the hotel, usually on the plane home, and I plan out my next year's training. I know roughly when all the Giants live shows are, they go in the calendar. I know when I need to be pushing on my lifts. I know when I need to be kind of backing off. I know when I've got my blocks where I want to get bigger, and the blocks where I want to get stronger. So that's a big advantage. In the early days, I actually think it hindered me a little bit, because obviously, I did a lot of obviously studying, and I knew what worked with rugby players. Yeah. And I was a rugby player myself. And when I started out, I actually applied the same kinds of programs I was using my rugby players with myself, which was a big mistake, because, for a rugby player, the work they do in the gym is very supplementary to their rugby. So it's a lot less. It's a lot less work. You can't train rugby players like powerlifters, because they've also got to go out and run around on the field and sprint and jump and tackle and scrummage. So one of the mistakes I made was I just wasn't training enough. I wasn't getting enough training volume in. I wasn't doing the lifts enough. I was kind of working up to that top set and maybe 2 back off sets, and that was it. Once I kind of realised that actually the gym work is my sport, so I need to be dictating more time to it. That was a big change. That's when I started to have some really fast progress in my lifts. Once I made that realization. It sounds so basic now, but it's easy to forget about it when you're kind of planning this lovely training program and it all looks nice. But you actually forget that, rugby players, it's not their sport. For me, it's my sport, and I need to practice my sport as much as possible.
And obviously, I heard that when you started working at Harlequins, you helped design their gym, didn't you? Did you sneak a few strongman things in there?
Yeah, well, do you know what? When I first joined Harlequins back in 2011, I was actually a volunteer. So, I was an unpaid volunteer, and I was literally like mixing shakes. I was working in the gym with the guys, definitely coaching and stuff, but we were putting mats out, we were setting the field for training and stuff like that. We were doing a lot of grunt work, but I was learning off the other guys. But yeah, we were very, when we first started, we were training in Surrey Sports Park Gym. There's only like 6 racks in there, originally, and we were training with the members of the public in and around. Don't get me wrong, it's a good gym, but unfortunately it wasn't really fully prepared for a rugby team. So a couple of years down the line, I finally convinced the DOR that we should build a gym, and we managed to get that done. And it was a case that I wasn't even given a budget. I would ask like, "What's my budget?" And he was like, "Well, just put whatever you want in, and then I'll tell you whether it's too much or not." It's a very difficult situation if you're trying to save money, but you want to get some of the best. And designing a gym is it's fantastic fun. It's like a kid in a sweet shop. So I went out and I managed to design our gym that we've got now, which is just next to our office buildings. It's definitely a case of some bits of kit maybe got put in there that like for example, I don't think there's many Premiership rugby clubs that have a deadlift bar. So that definitely got put on the list, and designing it, I was thinking about the players, of course, but there's some of my strongman kit got moved in for some periods. For a period of time, we had my monolift in there before I built the home gym.
Right.
So definitely some little bits kind of snuck in there for a wee while.
Do you find that maybe some of the players from Harlequins are they sometimes interested in giving strongman a go? Maybe some at forwards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I work predominantly with the forwards, so I do most of their work in the gym, and there's a couple of guys all of the guys absolutely love the fact that I'm competing. They love the shows. They're always watching the videos and supporting me whenever I'm competing, which is great. There's a couple of guys who want to kind of give some stuff a go, and I'm just like, whoa. It's not a good idea, because that's one of the questions I always get asked is, do I do strongman training with my rugby players? And the simple answer is no. The closest they'll get is maybe some sled push, maybe a bit of arm over arm we'll do in the summer as part of pre-season for conditioning. The reason for that is it's just such an injury risk.
Yeah.
And if I injure one of our athletes, doing like a tire flip, for example, suddenly the DOR is going to be on my case, and he's going to be wondering why he hasn't got his best players out in the field every week. So it's more risk reward, and obviously we think it's a little bit safer doing some more kind of standard barbell work and different forms of conditioning with these guys, rather than like weird lifts and lifting some crazy things.
Yeah. That actually goes quite nicely into the next couple of questions that I had then. Yeah, I thought you were looking at the questions that I'd written down there. So just going on, because obviously you mentioned that you increase your weight gradually, and obviously a lot of the events are like the loaded carries and that sort of stuff, and watching you yourself do some of the events, the speed at which you do it, but again carrying the amount of weight that you've got as well. What does your conditioning look like? And if you know what the events are, because obviously you mentioned that you'd look out at what the competitions are for the year. Do you cater your conditioning or dropping body weight around the events, or do you try and maintain a certain weight and just change the training around, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I've always been quite gifted in terms of I've always had a very good base level of conditioning.
Yeah.
I lived off that for a long time. I didn't actually have to do any kind of traditional cardio or anything like that, apart from my kind of just daily kind of work, like working with the guys, just moving around, etc. But yeah, like a prime example here is obviously I'm always trying to put on body weight. And then I got the events for Britain's Strongest Man this year. I saw what they were, and I was like, it's a bad idea to go into this show heavy.
Right.
Because for those who don't know, the Giants live shows are quick. We go through the events really quick. When I found out the deadlift was like 330 for reps, that's going to be a lot of reps. Obviously, you had the log press medley, and then Conan's wheel, loading race, and then stones. These are not events that you want to be heavy for.
Yeah.
So that's where I made sure that I stopped trying to put on weight then. I settled at like 145 and tried to just hold that weight. And then my training was just purely structured towards doing the events as much as I could. So every Friday I'd do 3 events in a row. Try and keep my rest periods quite short. So I do the Conan's wheel. I do my loading race with all the implements, trying to go as fast as I can. I do the stones. So I train all those events back to back in quite a short period to try and replicate the comp. And then I even did the week out from the comp, I did effectively a competition run through, something I haven't done for a long, long time, just to make sure my body was used to doing an event after another event. So it was used to, going to a deadlift after I've done the log press, and especially important was going into the loading medley after the deadlift. Once your legs are a little bit jelly because you've had to do quite a lot of reps. So it was like training specificity for me this year for Britons was through the roof. I don't think I could have done anything more to get as close to the events that I could. Even down to I set up 3 logs in the gym to get used to that medley. So I'm not just putting plates on the same log. I'm lifting with different logs. I'm pulling on the axle. I'm doing the loading with as close implements as I can get. Loading into the back of a pickup truck or using to skips, but getting that height right. I was doing Conan's wheel. I actually looked back at videos of with the Conan's wheel with the setup we used, and I counted how many steps it took for me to go around.
Right.
And then I counted how many steps it took me to go around on the bit of kit I had, and we worked out how far I needed to go on my kit to be breaking the records and stuff like that on the competition kit. So this is the kind of detail I was going into for this kind of comp, just breaking every single event down and just making sure I was ready for everything they kind of threw at us. Because it's a fast show, and the best decision I ever made was not trying to push up to 150 kilos then. It was coming into that show a little bit lighter and fitter.
Yeah, I suppose. At the top level, going into that amount of detail. I mean, obviously, when you look at I've never actually tried the Conan's wheel. I think the closest I've got is maybe doing a Zercher squat. But you can see on your face when you're carrying it around, it must be a tough event. And obviously, the amount of detail that you've put into there, and when you look at sort of some of the monsters, if you like you mentioned about Big Z on the plane, and Brian Shaw and Thor as well, really big guys. Do you think that that's how getting closer to beating them, putting that amount of detail in training, and think that actually this is how I can go about beating these guys?
You have to, because you've got Brian, for example, is that monster guy, but he also goes into the detail. So you have to be so prepared if you're going to try and take these guys on, because they've got a huge body weight advantage. So then you have to make sure that if you're trying to up your body weight, which is fine for the static lifts, you can't lose what your X factor is. So for me, that's the speed of moving. So there's no point me kind of bulking up to 190 kilos if then I start losing the moving events, which I usually win. So it's a tough conundrum, but you have to kind of look at every single minute detail to be able to beat these guys. And obviously in recent years, that's what Eddie did. Eddie looked at every tiny detail and managed to beat those guys at Worlds in 2017.
What are some of your, because obviously we mentioned about the deadlift, but what are some of your favourite and strongest events, and maybe some of your events that you put in a lot more work in the background?
Yeah, so obviously the deadlift is one of my strongest. I'm always expected to win the deadlift for reps whenever it comes up. Deadlift for max we've got this year. I had a couple of questions on my YouTube about why I never trained for deadlift for max. Yeah. It's because I don't have it. I've got it in competition this year again, so I'll start 10 weeks out training for that. But other events, I've got 2 world records. So my first world record is the 400 kilo frame carry. So that's a quick sprint for me, 20 meters. And then the other one is the duck walk and drag, the chain carry. So any of those kind of events, I'm really strong at. And then obviously my weakness over the years has been my pressing. Especially my log, and I've been working. Log seems to come up every single comp at the moment, right. But it's something I've been working on, and it's improving. And do you know what? Actually, the log press is probably the event I enjoy training the most.
Right.
Believe it or not, I really love seeing the progress I get on it, and it's improved a massive amount. So yeah, looking forward to going to the World Log Press Championships and trying to hit a good number on that. The thing is, though, that it just keeps moving on. That's the thing. Start getting, like, for example, I'm closing in on that 200 kilo log press now, and like 5-6 years ago that would be a really good effort, and now suddenly 200 is probably getting you like eighth, because everyone's got better at it. It's just insane how much the sport has progressed.
Yeah. Do you think? Because obviously you mentioned there you enjoy the log lift, but obviously it's an event you're aiming to get better at. Do you just feel like sometimes some of the events that you're doing, you just actually, like when you mentioned about a kid in a sweet shop designing that gym? Do you think sometimes that some of the events you're just playing, it's just you just enjoy doing them? Because a lot of events, it's like obviously getting involved in. To me, strongman, yes, the injuries and that sort of stuff, but it looks pretty cool. It looks, to be able to see that. Do you have that feeling when you're doing it?
Yeah, I always enjoy training, whatever training, even if it's an event I'm not very good at, I still enjoy training it. But it's a strange one. Like some events, they never feel that hard to train. Others are like an absolute killer. I remember I did some had to train truck pull. So we were training truck pull. I had Luke Stoltman down with me, staying for the week, and we went and borrowed a removal company's truck.
Right.
And it was fun, don't get me wrong, it was fun. But afterwards, we were supposed to do a double session that day. We were supposed to do truck pull in the morning and then go home, have some food and rest, and then go up back to the gym later. And we we did the first pull as a warm up, and then we got the guys to load the truck up to about 28 tons. Yeah. And then we did a second pull, and then we kind of like looked at each other, and I was like, "Oh, do you want to do another one?" And he was like, "Do you want to do another one?" So we ended up doing another one because neither one of us wanted to back down, and that was a bad decision because we did 2 heavy truck pulls, and then I think we got back home and we were just sitting there, and like my arms were like completely numbed up. Like Luke had like ice on his head. I was trying to like cool down. And it was an event that you enjoyed at the time, but then afterwards it definitely had a bit of a revenge on you. That second session just didn't happen for me. I was just out.
Do you find that, because obviously events like that, pulling the amount of weight of that truck, and the impact or the effect it has on your body, do you find that sometimes when you're training for events it throws you a little bit of a curveball and it might have a knock-on effect on other sessions? And how do you sort of plan for that or change your training around for that?
Yeah, so for example, with the silver dollar deadlift, it's a very heavy, intense lift. So you have to be kind of like cautious where you put it in the program, and other things have to drop out. So if you've got an extreme event like that you need to train, then you just know you're going to need some rest days around it. You can't just add something in like that and not take anything else out. So a big example is maybe once I found out at Worlds that I had a deadlift, I didn't have a squat. This was a couple of years ago. I knew there was no chance of me squatting at Worlds, then I just dropped squatting out completely for the last like 4 weeks of my prep, just because there was no real point doing it. Even though I enjoy it, at that point my training was so specific they just had to drop out. And I know once I get closer to Worlds and the events are heavier, I tend to have a lot more rest days. I drop out a training day, and all my training is just training the events. I'm not doing any other like fluff in the gym. I'm not doing press downs. I'm not doing like skull crushers. I'm not doing incline dumbbell presses. That all that stuff's gone. It's just purely training my sport.
Yeah. And because obviously there's different events. Well, there's some core lifts that are always in certain events, like you mentioned about the log. But do you find that not maybe starting each cycle from scratch, but each cycle is maybe a little bit different because obviously with a different amount of events?
Yeah, definitely. So it's obviously certain lifts will stay in. So the vast majority of the time I'll still deadlift in some form. but the different type of lifts that go in will have different needs. So train log press, I'll tend to do a lot of like banded work, seated lockouts, work like that I probably wouldn't do if it was a dumbbell. So yeah, you definitely have to switch your training around just to make sure you're kind of focused on what you need for competition. And this is something I see a lot with the like more amateur guys, is they'll just train strongman and then try and compete.
Right.
And they'll compete too much. So they'll want to do shows, every couple of weeks if they can, and they don't focus on those shows that matter. Instead, they're going for, I don't know, South East England's novice under 105, as opposed to trying to push on and improve. That's probably my biggest advice, is make sure you pick your competitions depending on what's important to you, and then make sure you train towards them. Once you find out the events, a lot of promoters are really good now at putting the events out. You don't need to know the exact minute details of what events are, but if you know you've got a log press, you need to train log, and everything needs to be focused on improving your log, not your axle or dumbbell.
Do you find that as you've become probably maybe more successful throughout strongman, and probably become a little bit more professional in the way that you're doing things, are you a little bit more picky with the competition that you do now, and what lessons have you learned from when you started out and then going from 105s up until the Open?
Yeah, so from an early doors, I didn't see the point of just doing a show.
Yeah.
I didn't see the point of doing a show that didn't lead anywhere. So even when I was first started competing, I was straight away under 105, Midlands, England's, UK's, try and get the UK title. And then the same thing happened when I moved up another level. So it was, South England, England's, UK's, run by Glenn. And then from there, obviously, Giants Live, every single Giants Live show I do is now, it has a purpose, So I don't ever just do a show because it looks fun. It has to be, I'm looking to try and win it. I'm trying to progress somewhere. So it's not a case of maybe picking your shows. I'm not going in and going, right, I think I'll do that one because the events suit me. Let's put it that way. But I'll do that show because it pushes me on towards Worlds, or there's a financial aspect as well, to be able to win some money, because it is a professional sport. So yeah, it is something I did learn very early on, that I don't think there's any point just doing a random show.
Yeah. And at the start of the year, obviously after World's Strongest Man, do you get a little bit of an insight into what competitions would allow you to qualify for different ones, so it gives you a little bit of a better idea?
Yeah, I guess I'm spoiled really, because most of the Giants Live shows, which are the predominant ones that I compete in, the dates for those are set out really early. They're set out a year in advance. And then the events are set up quite early as well. So it does make it a little bit easier for me just to plan my season. But it used to be a lot easier when we used to have a set season for strongman. It used to be, we start in April and we finish in September. Now it's a little bit more difficult because there's so many shows. Yeah. But yeah, I tend to kind of look at where shows are and see how I can fit my training around it, definitely.
Yeah. So we've just touching back on when you mentioned about you did the truck pull with Luke Stoltman, with the as you've progressed through as well, and obviously meeting other strongmen, who's been sort of like your biggest influences, and do you try and take things or learn from other strongmen as well as you've sort of progressed through?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I learned from all the guys, and the first ones, the ones closest to me that I train with the most is kind of Terry Hollands and Rob Frampton. Rob down in Portsmouth, like phenomenal. That gym has produced so many over 180 kilo log presses. It's insane. Right. I work with Rob now on my log, and he's a good friend of mine, and he helps me out massively. And then obviously Terry, like we've trained together lots. We trained together in the build up to Brits. We helped each other out. And I just try and learn, competing at World's Strongest Man, making 9 finals, I think it was. You just learn anything and everything I can off these guys. And, obviously I kind of grew up and we started competing around the same time and progressed at the same rates as kind of Luke. And obviously then Tom came onto the scene. So we've always been quite close in terms of, like we're good mates and that. yeah, like just learning off those guys that came before me, like chatting to Eddie, trying to learn as much as I can about what it took for him to pull the 500 and win World's Strongest Man, and look at his approach and the same as I've always looked up to kind of Brian Shaw, because I think he was the first like truly professional strongman in terms of his approach, like getting everything nailed down, no expense spared for like him trying to win competitions, like highly competitive. So yeah, these guys I definitely look up to, and I'm very fortunate that I'm in a situation where I can train with a couple of them kind of semi-regularly.
Yeah, having watched some of the shows and World's Strongest Man, and it does come across that you get on with each other, and it's a good environment to train in. But when does that sort of switch to that competition side of things? Is it friendly competition, or is there ever any big rivalries that you feel?
There's definitely rivalries, but at the end of the day, I think we're all fans of strength, Yeah. So we want to see big lifts. So if I'm watching, Luke go for this 230 log, I want him to do it, and I want him to, succeed. Like I was happy than anyone that he got over that 400 kilo barrier on the deadlift recently. And it's nice because you're competing with someone, but we're not fighters. We're not in MMA. We're not trying to get one over on someone. If someone outlifts you, then they're better on the day. It's not anything other than that. And obviously, yes, there's a couple of guys who really don't get on, but in the vast majority of guys, we just kind of, we like seeing big lifts and crazy things done, so everyone supports each other.
I quite like throwing that question out there because in competing in powerlifting myself, and I came from a rugby background. What actually made me laugh is when you said you went from back row to winger. I actually started off as a winger and started working my way forward. So I did the opposite a little bit. But going into an environment where obviously rugby's obviously two teams against each other, you want to get the better over that team. But in powerlifting, especially the more competitions that I've been to, even at I remember at the All Englands, a guy came out and broke the I can't remember whether it was the English or the British deadlift record, and then the guy who actually held the record was helping run the platform. So, but he came out and patted him on the back, and like you say, everyone wants to see good, people lift more and get PB. So, even at the top level, I find it interesting to ask, and everyone wants to see people lift more and see these crazy weights, get lifted, which I think is good.
Yeah, definitely. You're not trying to like get one over on anyone. It's all just it's kind of you versus the weight, really. It's nothing crazy.
So just touching on that, seeing people and as the weights have got better, what have you found to be your biggest challenges or biggest changes that you've made, with the becoming more professional and the more competitions that you're doing and seeing these weights get heavier and heavier?
Yeah, I mean, the big challenge now is, like I said, we don't really have a set season. Shows, there's so many different shows, and all promoters obviously want the best athletes there, that you kind of get pulled in multiple directions. So it's actually quite tough to get the time off to go away and have an off season and to train. This is a blessing in disguise for us, really, giving our chance to our bodies to recover. That's one of obviously the big problems, and then the other thing is just the weights are getting crazy heavy now. We had a 615 kilo yoke at Worlds last year. Which we found out about very late. Right. It wasn't a massive problem for me, but just put it in context, that was a 150 kilo yoke PB. Right. I've been competing quite a while, there's a crazy weight to suddenly come in, and obviously you can't train for that, not with that kind of short notice. But I didn't see it as a huge problem. I think you just got to kind of get on with it. If you think about it being a problem, you'll create problems for yourself. I guess the big challenges are making sure you're on the top of your game all year round for all the shows, and that's sometimes quite difficult to do. I think we saw that in me last year, as I performed really well at Britain's last year as well. Obviously getting that second place, and then Europe's was a bad comp for me. And then Worlds, then I did well again, and then Wembley was good and bad. So it's tough to if you've got all these shows and you have to prioritise something, it's tough to be on the top of your game the whole year round. And especially if you've got a full-time job to also do. So yeah, it's that's probably the biggest challenge.
Do you find that there's people that you'll work with? So obviously, with the work that you do you work with the physios to make sure that your body's on top, or how do you go about looking after your body?
Yeah, so that's a couple of the big changes that I've made in recent years. Is I see our club osteo like separate from work now. I see them once a week. I'll get massage done once a week. I'll do cryo in the cryo chamber once a week as well. And then the rest of the time at home, I'm just trying to get my recovery work, whether it's hydrotherapy in the hot tub, whether it's using the myo pumps, which is the big kind of trousers people see me use, which is the air pressure to push the blood flow back. Compex, I'm using all these different tools at home just to try and recover between events. And hopefully with the physios, I don't like to ask our club physios to know how busy they are. So that's why I'll tend to kind of go outside of work and look at different routes. But the physios I try and reserve for when I've picked up an injury, and they're great for looking after me then. Like, when I tore my bicep off, I was fortunate that obviously I knew the surgeon. So I've called up our head physio backstage from when I tore off in 2017, and he booked me in to see the surgeon like on the Wednesday following it. So yeah, very fortunate to use my links that way.
How was the rehab after you tore your bicep? How was the training afterwards?
Yes, I mean, funny story. There was like I tore my bicep, and that was at Europe's Strongest Man. It was 6 weeks before Worlds. So literally the weekend before, I'd had my invite to Worlds, and that was going to be my third World's Strongest Man, and it was the one I was determined to make the final for. So when it happened, I tore my bicep. I was in the sling. I knew exactly what I'd done. I was just like, oh, fuck it. So we had some guys backstage, some of the Giants Live guys helping us out. Oh, can we get you in a thing? I was like, yeah, I'll have 2 Heinekens. And then 10 minutes later, I want you to bring me another 2 Heinekens. Going from there. And yeah, I think we did the, I don't know if anyone remembers that, I was hammered for the athlete meeting at the end. I was having photos with people, I could hardly stand up. And that's why like my bicep bled. Like there's some pretty famous images on my Instagram of it just being black. Yeah. Just because obviously the alcohol thins blood and it's more bruising and stuff. But yeah, roll forward. Obviously, I got the surgery done really early. I was under a week between injury and getting it reattached, and then it was just a slow process. So it took me 12 weeks to rehab it, which is good. And then I didn't have a competition until November time, which was in Sweden again. Which is my comeback show, which is really good show for me. And then I came back to competing at Britain's and doing well. It was a case of I think my advice, because obviously it is a very common injury in the sport, and a lot of people message me. So if anyone's listening who does tear their bicep in the future, the biggest advice I've got is do not start lifting early on it. Make sure you get the range of motion back in your forearm, so you get that full supination of your forearm first before you start lifting, and it'll save you a lot of time. Yeah. But just focus on other things. I was doing a 3 times a week squat program with a safety bar while I was out injured, so it's not like I was taking a break off training. It was just my focus had shifted. So yeah, that's my big advice really. It's just get yourself a goal that doesn't involve the injured site. It doesn't even have to be lifting based. It can be something else.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when anyone, there's a handful of people that I've trained who have had injuries, and it's just focusing on what you can do rather than you're not gonna and like you say, not rushing into doing anything, because you might end up causing more harm than good. One thing I wanted to touch on as well, because obviously we mentioned about the recovery side of things and the nutrition and the training side of things. And I know for me, when I played rugby, there was a ritual of what I'd put in my bag where I'd sit in the changing rooms. Do you have any rituals that you find that you follow, whether that be eating the same thing on a competition day or how you pack your bag? Is there any little traditions that you try and do?
No, I mean, I usually forget stuff. I think I actually forgot my deadlift socks this year at Brits, which was fortunate that SBD had a stand out front, which we had out. No, nothing like that. I mean, when I go to my pre-lift ritual, it's the same every single time.
Yeah.
Well, that's not superstitious. That's like, because I want everything to be exactly the same every single time I do it, whether it's a training lift or it's a competition lift. So I'll always put my left strap on the bar and then the right strap, and then I walk my feet in. For example, my deadlift looks a bit funny. That little ritual came about because I originally used the deadlift suit. And that's how I moved my body into the bar when I had a deadlift suit on. I always want a deadlift suit. They're a pain in the nuts, literally. And you have to kind of like wiggle yourself in to get in under the bar. And then what I realized is I wanted my setup to be the same, even if I wasn't wearing the suit. So I don't really wear the suit now, apart from for max lifts. So I started doing the same thing when I wasn't wearing the suit, just to make sure my setup was exactly the same every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you said about wearing a suit. There was like in a quick powerlifting session on, and a couple of my lifters went over there, and they came back as though they'd been in a scrap. They were looked battered and bruised trying to put all these pieces of kit on. So we touched on it a little bit at the start as well, and obviously mentioned that World's Strongest Man has been moved to is it November? November, yeah. What are your thoughts on the impact it'll have on everyone else's training and on other competitions that may be cancelled or rearranged? How are you feeling about it being moved?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge issue for me. I mean, I would have preferred it to be the time it was originally planned. Don't get me wrong, so I'd plan my training out, but ultimately I've got this little off-season period now to get bigger and stronger, which is great. The bigger problem for me is we've got a lot of shows in a very small period of time now. So, we've got obviously Europe's Strongest Man, World Deadlift Champs, then you've got Glasgow in October. You've got potentially the Royal Albert Hall if it needs to be rescheduled, the Strongman Classic if it has to be rescheduled, and then you've got, that's not even counting any Arnold qualifiers and WUS competitions. So the back end of the year is going to be crazy busy, and a lot of back-to-back comps, which is a little bit of a problem. But you just have to prioritise World's Strongest Man. Yeah. Like, you have to. That's the one we all kind of compete for. So it's just going to be a case of maybe picking and choosing comps a little bit more carefully.
Do you think it'll come down to, because I'm not 100% sure of how long you have between competitions, but do you think it'll come down to, if they're all a little bit staggered, as to who can maybe recover the best, rather than the how good your training block is up to that competition?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, if you go into a plan just to compete at Worlds, and any other comps you do are just going to be for fun, or you pick one lift to be able to push forward through, there's probably going to be definitely, I think putting your training out there is going to be really important for this one. Yeah. Get your training right to be able to peak for that time when you've got other comps in the way. That's going to be hugely important. In terms of the recovery, I think there's enough time between them that it's not going to be a huge issue. But obviously, if you do recover quicker, it means you can train quicker. Yeah. So if you recover quickly from a comp and you get back to training after a couple of days, then suddenly, you're up again on the competition. So it's either way you look at it, it's going to be hugely important. It's going to be a mix of recovering as fast as you can and getting your training plan sorted so you can be peaking at the right time.
Yeah, you looked a little bit excited there when you were saying about it looks like a little bit of a good challenge to see how you're gonna go about it.
I know I've been because once I found out, I put the change in the dates in my tracker, and I was kind of just working out the weeks between it and what I need to be lifting on certain weeks. And once we find out the events are Worlds, it'll obviously make things a lot easier. But that will be a while off. But you can kind of, exactly what you're going to expect. You can have a vehicle pull, you can have some form of press, some form of deadlift or squat, loading, stuff like that. So it shouldn't be a problem to train for.
Are you in contact quite regularly with Giants Live then? Are they sending out information regularly to keep you posted so you can keep track of your training, or?
Yeah, they speak to the promoters, and they'll let us know, when the events are. We don't know what the events are for certain shows yet, but the guys at Giants Live are fantastic at letting you know with plenty of time. Like Darren's great in terms of he lets anyone go and use the kit that's available. So if you want to go up and use the kit, it doesn't matter if you're flying in from anywhere else, go and train on the kit. it's always available, which I can't think of another promoter that would allow that. So that's really good. So yeah, it's good that you've got the links there, and the Giants Live stuff's always really well organised and planned out. Exactly what you're doing. Obviously, the world stuff is very venue dependent, so they usually take a little bit more time to organise what the events are and what weights and stuff. So
yeah, oh, cool. So obviously we chatted quite a lot about quite a lot of topics there, and you threw out a couple of bits of advice, along the way. But the last question, or the most important question for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom that we've chatted about today?
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me is anyone listening to this is just make sure you take your time and progress every single session, every lift. Even if it's a 1 kilo progression, keep progressing. If it's one more rep on the same weight, and track everything. Put it in context. I hadn't won a strongman show since 2013 before I won Britain's in 2020. Just because the step up and the step up in show, and I'm competing against world's strongest man athletes the whole time. So that kind of puts into context how long this process takes. It was a 10-year process for me going from starting in strongman to winning Britain's strongest man. Yeah. Just take your time with it. Keep progressing slowly with anything, if it's just a kilo increase, or like I said, and enjoy it. Like, there's no point doing this if you don't enjoy it. If suddenly you find you're not enjoying it, take a break.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's not that well paid that people are going to make a fortune off of it. So there's no point in it being a job. You've got to enjoy it as a hobby.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to finish on, because I think in today's society, everyone wants it now. Everyone wants to doing it there. But and as well, watching the videos that you'll put out there, and watching people yourself competing in the competitions, that's just sort of the end product, if you like. There's a lot more work that going in there, and one of the biggest things is 100%, and enjoy it. When I'm working with the clients that I work with, I don't just want them strong for 12 weeks. I want them strong, getting stronger, and keep getting stronger, and keep enjoying it. Because one of my biggest things, if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to put enough effort in, and you're probably more likely just to fall off. Some really, really good points to finish on there. For everyone listening as well, who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, or want to see what's your progress through training, where can people find you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can get in touch on Instagram at Adam Bishop Strongman, or on my YouTube channel, which is Adam Bishop Strongman again. So pretty easy to find. I'm chucking loads of content up there in terms of some how-tos. I put a deadlift and a squat one up there, which I suggest people watch. Apart from that, on Facebook, which is Adam Bishop SC. Instagram is probably the one that everyone seems to use these days, so probably get on me on there.
Yeah. And also the clean and press of your Jeep. I saw you put that on.
That's even quite popular video, yeah.
Thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. Really, really, really looks forward to picking your brains. Especially seeing you lift in Britain's strongest man, world's strongest man, and then to have the chance to chat with you was pretty cool. No worries at all. Thanks a lot to everyone listening. Thanks to you, Adam, for taking the time to chat with me, and I will see you all next week.